Welcome to episode 10, the last episode in this full projects residential series. In this feature-packed episode, we're going to review another method of setting up that site plan that we created and getting it rotated. We're also going to finish up our lighting schedule and show how we can repurpose some of the parameters that are built into Revit to put into our schedule versus creating shared parameters. We're going to add some text notes to our plans. We're going to create a symbol list, symbol legend. We're going to finish that panel schedule, and we're going to finish the one-line diagram and just do some general buttoning up of the project. And then we're going to finally create sheets, fill in the title block, and then we're going to print or extract to a PDF. So lots to come. Let's get into it. I wanted to address a comment that I had from one of the viewers. It was a great point that many times the architectural model is set up such that there is two different north. You have a project north, which is what we use for the floor plans, such that it's a made up north so that we can draw the plan with horizontal and vertical lines without having some crazy angle in there like you would see on the site plan. So as you recall, in that architectural site plan, we have the building at an angle from this north arrow, which is true north. So true north is up on this page and the building is slanted. And in the previous video, to create our site plan, I showed a method of bringing this PDF into our model and acquiring with just lines and angles what angle this is tilted at and setting things up that way. But like the viewer pointed out, if the architectural model is set up properly, we can acquire that angle directly from the architectural model and set our site plan up for that without having to go through this PDF scenario. So for example, we go back to the site plan, and to bring that true north value, again, which is set up behind the scenes, it's set up by the architect in their model, and it's set up with survey points, things like that, that I'm not going to get into in this video, but they set that all up for you so you can just acquire that point through Revit. So if we go up to the Manage tab, there's a little button over here called Coordinates. And it says it manages coordinates for linked models, which is what we have. We have a linked architectural model. So if you click on this drop down, you will get to a number of different things you can do. You can acquire some coordinates from a model. You can publish things. You can reset. All these things. We want to acquire coordinates from the architectural model so that our model will match. So we go to Acquire Coordinates, and then at the bottom left it says Select a linked project from which to acquire shared coordinate system. So we want to acquire from this linked architectural model, so hover over it so that it highlights like that. And here's our linked architectural model. Click it. And it says here, coordinates acquired from the RAC Basic Sample Project, which is our architectural model. And so it acquired the coordinates that quickly from our model. So now how do we deal with this? Well, just to show you the contrast, go back to the first floor plan. One thing we haven't talked about within our view template, or if you don't have a template, it would just be up here, is the coordinate system that it's using. If you go down here, you'll see orientation, this line right here, which is included in this template, Project North. You can see that there's Project North or True North. Well, the floor plans are set up by default as Project North, and that makes them vertical and horizontal. So our site plan right now, if we go to our view template for the site plan, it is also orientation Project North. Now that we have acquired coordinates from the architectural model, we can just change this to True North, and that will instantly, right there, orient our plan to be relative to True North, so that True North is vertical, which tilts the building. This ends up being the same thing we did by manually rotating our view, and I really wanted to show you in that video how to rotate a view for other reasons if you need to, but this is actually the best workflow to accurately set up your site plan such that it is properly oriented. So I just wanted to cover that and show you this is the actual best method for moving forward. We also need to finish up our lighting fixture schedule that we started. So if you recall over here under schedules, we have a lighting fixture schedule. And first of all, if there's a schedule that I'm going to drag onto a sheet view that I'm actually going to use in production, I like to make it all capital. So I just go through it and change to lighting fixture schedule. Simple as that. And double click that to open it. This is our schedule, and we can hold down the control key and mouse scroll to enlarge it if you want to see it. That's better for the video. So this was our lighting fixture schedule, and we simply went L1 through L12. And we have some placeholders for lumens. We have some basic descriptions. Now, depending on your company standards, you may have other columns you would like to put in here. Now, we typically include more than this. We also include things like the housing construction and the optics. What kind of lensing is there? What kind of distribution pattern is there? And then we also include things like what type of driver is it? Is it a standard driver, or is it maybe a dimmable driver, remote driver, things like that? So you can add more columns. That's the easy part. Now, the tricky part is what parameters will you use for those columns? We only have so many parameters in our lighting fixture families that we mostly brought in from Revit's out-of-the-box library. So let us review our lighting plan. First floor lighting. And let's take a look at one of our lights. Now, we can also get to these lights down here in our project browser under lighting fixtures. And as you recall, we made our own lights and gave them our own names like L12. So if we double click L12, look at its type properties and type parameters. We have a number of parameters under identity data. We used model to help filter our site light fixtures. So that's already used. Now we can use manufacturer, and then maybe this is appropriate for housing, but we won't find a housing, we won't find a driver, we won't find, a notes parameter built in. Now, an advanced topic would be to create some shared parameters in each of these lighting families that we can then schedule. Again, that's more advanced, and that takes family editing, which eventually you need to get into. But for now, as a beginner lesson, we are just going to, what I call, repurpose some of these built-in parameters and use them for whatever we want. I have a whole video on doing this, which I'll point to up above in that link up there. But I'm going to show you the basics of how you can, from a beginner's perspective, we can just use some of these parameters to do other things. So for example, let me go back to my schedule. If you recall, the way we deal with this schedule and add more columns, these are called fields. So we go over here to fields and hit edit. And here we already have the fields that we're using, the type mark, lumens, load, and description, as you see up here. Let's bring in the manufacturer parameter and say, okay, and it adds it. Now, we don't have to leave this as manufacturer. We can change this to whatever we want. So we can call this something like housing. That's just a heading. And then we can type in here whatever we want. So again, we are under the basis that we have a lighting designer that has given us the lighting design and given us fixture cut sheets that describe these light fixtures. And so we just kind of want to reproduce that. So let's say this L1, the suspended linear, is just a extruded aluminum housing. And we might give dimensions. Now, when I hit enter, it lets me know that this change will be applied to all elements of this type L1. Since L1 is a type, it will apply to all the L1s, which is what we want. I'm going to shrink this a little bit. So, extruded aluminum housing. If we go back to the L1, which is a pendant lighting fixture, we can open all these up to find it. There's L1. If we double click that, here's the type properties and parameters. Now we can see that it filled in extruded aluminum housing into the manufacturer parameter. So again, we're repurposing that. So what are some other parameters that we could possibly use? There's some type comments. There's a URL. Cost would be probably a number, but we can use some type comments and the URL. So let's go to, in our schedule, we can go to type comments as our optics. And then here we can put in the optics of this, and we will just say, we'll say that this suspended linear is a 20 up, 80 down type of direct indirect. So that works there, and we can stretch these out as we like. And then the last thing we can do is add one more for the driver. And let's see if we can use this URL, repurpose that guy. So I'm just going to reuse the URL for my driver comments. So down here at URL, move this over. Okay. And driver. And you can see that this is already in here for some of these. So driver, we can just say 10% dimming driver, 10% dimming. So that just gives you an idea. I'm not going to fill all these out, but you can get the idea that this is how you can create this lighting fixture schedule to have more fields, more columns, and repurpose them without having to get into each fixture family and edit that and create these shared parameters. So that's kind of a shortcut beginner method to do this. Another thing I'd like to cover is if you've done electrical designs before, you've often wanted to add some notes to a plan. And you can actually just type these notes in and point to them with arrows, or you can have a keynote of some type where you have a symbol pointing to this, and then the symbol is reflected up somewhere else on the sheet to describe that keynote. Now, Revit does have a built-in keynotes system that you can learn to use, and it relies on an external text file and things like that. I think if for a beginner, and the way I actually still prefer, is to just have my own symbol and my own notes without them needing to tie together. I find that I'm still able to keep those coordinated without the keynote system. So I'm just going to show you the shortcut method, and that is either have a symbol, a custom symbol, which is the way we do it, or when you, again, as a beginner, and if you don't want to have to create a custom symbol yet, you can just use the simple version that I've seen other engineers actually still use. It just say note 1. If you say note 1 and then use the arrow to point to it, then this doesn't take a special symbol, and you can just type your notes. Now, where are you going to type your notes? Should we type them here in the view? Well, that's not recommended. The best way we found to do this is to either type them directly on the sheet, which again, I don't recommend as much, or create your own notes as a drafting view or what's called a legend. Now, the difference between a drafting view, which we have for our one-line diagram, if we go up here, drafting views, one-line diagram, the difference between this drafting view and a legend, they are both an annotative type of view, but you can only have this drafting view dragged onto one single sheet. Now, for a one-line diagram, that works fine. But for something like a set of notes, if you have a project that has repetitive power plans, like we may use the same notes on first floor and second floor power plan, we can't drag a drafting view onto both of those sheets when we eventually make the sheets. So we want to make it a legend. So that's the difference. A legend will let you place a legend on multiple sheets. So let's create a legend. You can do it from here, or you can go down to View and then go to Legend. Give it a name. And I'm going to call this Power Keynotes. And the scale won't really matter too much. And I've created a new legend now. It's empty. But I can just start typing. And I can say 1, suspend fixture at 8 feet above finished floor. Now this abbreviation we will put into a symbol list or symbol legend. So something as simple as that. And then you can put a heading up here, and you can line these up with that little blue dash and just say something like keyed notes, power. And if you want, you can have this underlined. There's some text options up here, bold or underlined. You can make it bold if you like. And that will help that stand out. Now, this legend, we can actually drag onto a sheet when we get into creating our sheets. But this is a way that I like to create my keyed notes or keynotes rather than just typing them onto the view or onto a sheet, because then you can rearrange them and you can use them multiple times. So I just wanted to show you that's how we are going to handle keyed notes on this project. Another thing we need to do to finish this up is create a symbol list or a symbol legend. Now, when you eventually get to the point where you create your own project template or project template file, the best practice is to have this symbol legend in that template, or at least in your library of details, so that you don't have to create it each time. But for a beginning project and you're just learning how to do this, I'm going to show you how you can create a symbol legend. So let's go to Legends. And again, a review of Legends is we can place this legend on multiple sheets. So sometimes you'll want this legend on each sheet. I prefer to just place it on one sheet personally, but some people use it on multiple sheets and some clients require that. So I make it as a legend rather than a drafting view. So let's go to New Legend, and we will call this Symbols. Now, how do we get our symbols onto here? So let's see if we can drag in some of our light fixtures to start with and see what happens. I'll bring in L1, and that's promising. Now I hit spacebar, I can't rotate it. So let me just place it, see if I can rotate the symbol, because, you know, along with the L1 3D geometry is an actual two-dimensional symbol. So we should be able to deal with this, and hit rotate, and there's a center point. Start at the right and click vertically. And it doesn't rotate. Let's bring in a electrical fixture. Let's get our standard receptacle in here. See what happens. There's a receptacle. Well, we get the symbol, but we also get the extrusion. And see if I can rotate this one. And I cannot rotate it either. So just dragging these 3D elements into a drafting view is not going to work for our symbol list. It's an advanced topic, but what you can do is you can create custom families that are just the symbol that can be brought into a symbol list. Now that's something you may want to do, but often the easiest way to deal with this is just to draw your symbols with drafting lines and go from there. So we can have this as a reference. But what we need to do is go to annotate, and with detail lines, recreate these symbols. And for the scale, you may want to go to a 1:1 scale, 12 inches equals a foot. And you can see here that at that scale, it doesn't even show these symbols. But this way I can draw them at a true paper space size, which is typically what a symbol list is. So let's go to a circle, and I want this about 1/8 inch diameter. So I have to really zoom in here. And I can do that, click on it, and then just type in 1/8 inch. There we go. And then I can put some medium lines works. I can put a line starting right at the bottom. Do something like this. I can move this over here. And then I can mirror this and create my own own mirror line somewhere in the middle. Something like that, you know, and I can adjust these as I want to make it look right. So you're really just going to have to go through and kind of draw your own symbols. And for the light fixture, we can do something like get a rectangle in here. And maybe get some dots, small circles to show the pendant. And there's a certain minimum size that things can be. And I think it's like right there. And then you can again mirror this. Mirror by drawing an axis. And the axis, it'll kind of snap to the center line. So there's a light fixture, and just draw all the symbols that you used in your lighting plan and floor plan, and even in your single line diagram. We've already drawn symbols by hand because we don't have a one line diagram package of symbols. So we can take this, and you can actually Control C, copy this, and then go to your symbols and actually paste it in, Control V, paste, and that will come in. And it was drawn at, 1-to-1 anyway. So at least we can do that, and then continue to draw your symbols, and then right next to it, you can type what they are. This can be duplex receptacle, and put whatever you would put in your symbol list. Sometimes for residential here, it'll be about 12 inches above finished floor. Or if you're doing commercial, it would be more like 18 inches, things like that. So you can just create your own symbol list and give it a title. If you want to bump that up a size, click on it, go over here and find your 1/4 inch, or you can customize this, make whatever size you want. And then you can simply draw a box around it. And you would do this for all of your symbols. But basic symbol list is just drafted. Again, you'll want to have something like this in your project template so that you don't have to create it on every project, and you can add a symbol or delete symbols as needed. So that's how we get the symbol list set up. Now we need to take a look at our panel schedule. We only have the one panel in this project, and button that up, make sure it's all ready. It's pretty close to done. We can make sure we have the proper circuit description for each of these, because if we didn't type a description in when we circuited, we could end up with just a miscellaneous name. So we also want to check breaker sizes. Now, again, in commercial work, 20 amp breaker is typically the smallest you see, except for small motors where we'll have a 15. But in residential, we use a lot of 15 amp breakers to save cost. Now, you can do that here. Like I mentioned at the beginning of my project series, this is a residential style project, but I'm doing it in more of a commercial method just to show those methods. So I could just leave these all at 20 amp, but I will change a few. So that for the standard receptacles, we're going to make these just 15 amp. So you can go through, and this is how you do it. You just simply change it here. But you can change these values here, or even in the floor plan. If you hover over something on this circuit and hit tab a couple times, you'll get to the electrical circuits. The little note right there comes up. Tab, electrical circuit, and then click it. And now you've selected the electrical circuit. And down here under rating, you can adjust it here. And we're not showing what frame it is in our panel schedule, so we're not so worried about the frame of the breaker. These are all the 100 amp frame breakers. But you can change it there. I like to change it here. So again, let's go 15 and just go through and change these how you want. And we have our main set up right. And instead of 225, let's say that this is just a 200 amp load center. And we do have a main circuit breaker. This is a commercial load summary. As you see down here, it's applying commercial demand factors. So it comes up with 157 amps for a total estimated demand, which is within our 200 amps. I show in other videos how I've created a custom load summary for residential calculations, which I will also point to up above if you want to look at that further. But for this project, we're going to leave it as a commercial style panel schedule because that is what most of our work is. Another thing we need to finish up is our one-line or single-line diagram that we had started prior. And it's up here as a drafting view under coordination. So double-click one-line diagram, and this is what we have, a very simple diagram for this single-panel house. So we have the transformer, which we've already labeled. This would be the meter. So we can start labeling the rest of this. And depending on how you do things for your designs, you can label these as you want. But really, this is just done in this drafting view with lines and text. And if you have symbols, you can use symbols. We can line these up like this. You can just label these how you want. And we can call this meter base. And again, just label these how you want. And you can add leaders up top to your text with the left and right leaders. You can get rid of a leader up here with this minus, remove leader. And just get these things lined up. It gives you some little construction lines here, the little dashed to make things look pretty. let's go ahead and label this as the load center. And again, whatever you do in your office, let's say the way you did things in CAD, you can do similar here, and it's a simple drafting view. I find drafting views in Revit are very easy to deal with. If you want to label these service laterals, you can do that as well. And let's say we want to label this with an actual size, and coming from the transformer to our meter, let's say that the utility is going to furnish the conductors. We just need to provide a conduit. So we will just say 3-inch conduit only. And then you might put things, again, whatever you do, you might put things like minimum 36-inch bury, but whatever you put for a note. Now on this one, we have this arrow, and like we saw on previous episodes, we can change this from an arrow to a different kind of symbol. So if you click on this, and then we can go to a drop down on properties, we already created a type of text that has a loop. So click on loop, and you'll see you have this little loop that you can move around and use that for looping around a single line. And the way you create that, if you missed it in a previous video, is you just go to edit type, create, duplicate it, and create your own name called loop. And then under the arrowhead, leader arrowhead, you can select from the drop down different kinds of arrowheads, boxes, diagonals, filled dots, all kinds of things. And this is, we chose loop. So that's how we did that. And then here you can label this one, but it's a simple diagram. It's just simple text with arrows and loops and some symbols. But that would complete your one-line diagram, and we will drag this onto a sheet. A couple things I wanted to finish up on this first floor power plan are a code issue that has been nagging me since I created this, and that is this guy right here. That is a big old column right through the middle of the project. Now, I'm not sure what purpose it serves. It doesn't appear to be structural. Let's take a look at a 3D view of this. Let's go ahead and turn off our selections so we don't select the model. And I'm going to just select a box like this and go up to this little view button up here called selection box. It isolates the selected elements in the current view and does a little 3D view of that. So there, it created a little 3D view of the area I surrounded, and it gives me this section box. Now, if you can't see this section box, and sometimes you can't see it, you need to go into the VG graphics and get that turned on. So it's actually under annotations, go down to the S's, and you will find section boxes, and it may be turned off. So make sure that gets turned on so that you can see this section box. And then when you click on the section box, you can drag the cut of that section where you want. So this is a nice little way to draw a small 3D section of an area. But I'm doing this just to show this column. And here's the top. It doesn't even go through the second floor. It is purely on the first floor. But it's a column, and technically, if you look at the NEC and read those rules, you will see that this is counted as a wall. Just as if I had a square box wall in the middle of my room, that is wall space that's greater than 2 feet. So I need to get a receptacle in there. So let's get a receptacle on this guy. And it's just going to be a standard receptacle like this. So right click, create similar. And luckily it is treated like a wall. So it lets me host my face hosted receptacle to it. So let's see, where do we want it? The other issue is how many would we need? It depends on the linear circumference, in this case, of this circle. Well, one way to figure that out is hover over it, get these back on, hover over it, and see if we can see the circumference. Now, we don't get the circumference of this over here. So what we can do is draw our own circle, and this should snap to the middle. Draw it out here and get the same size. Now if we click on this, it shows us the length of this line, which ends up being the circumference, is only 10 feet 3 inches. So it's less than 12 feet. We only need one receptacle on it. Get rid of this. So we will just draw one receptacle, create similar, and I'm going to put it on this north end of this so that we can use it out here. So right there, something like that. And I want to tie it into this circuit, and it would feed most likely, underground, under the crawl space. So tab, get to the circuit, edit circuit, add this guy, finish editing, and then again, tab to the circuit. It wants to draw the wiring. Click on there, hit arc wire, and it wants to put the home run here. Now, you can let it do that and get rid of this home run, or you can just say, I like the home run I have, and just delete this. So that's the way I'll handle that one. But it added it to circuit 16. I just wanted to address that one little issue. The other thing I want to address on this is we had already in previous episodes drawn some conduits into this panel. And this is how they show up in a plan view. I don't really like these giant green circles in my drawing. A couple ways I can deal with this. I can just turn conduits off on a power plan. Some power plans you actually want to show conduits. You may want to show some distribution on it. Other times you may have a separate view, a separate plan that shows distribution. So you have to make that judgment call. I'm going to keep conduits on in here just in case I want to show them somewhere. But what I can do is I can change the size of this symbol. And this is just simply an up-down conduit symbol. It's like looking down into the tube of the conduit. So if I just go up here to manage and go to it's an MEP setting, electrical setting. Down here, if I go down to conduit settings, it's not here, go down to rise drop, conduit rise drop annotation size. That is what this thing is. And it's drawing an 1/8 inch in paper size circle. And I don't need it that large. So let's pick something like maybe a 32nd of an inch. Tiny's fine. So that there is not, it's not too prominent. It's not obscuring the panel. I think that's fine. Again, I could totally just delete the conduit from this plan, but I'm going to leave it on. But that's one way you can deal with those sizes. And you don't have to have this giant 1/8 inch circle. Another finishing touch for this power plan, first floor power, is down here where I had not added these floor receptacles to my circuit. So I need to add them. I already did it over here, but on this one, I want to show you something to deal with wiring. We already have wiring shown between these two receptacles, and we want to add this guy in between them. So first of all, let's get the receptacle added. So let me hover over this receptacle, tab a few times until we get to the circuit. Click the circuit. Now we're editing a circuit. Edit circuit, and it's by default going to add to the circuit if you recall our circuiting. Click on this guy and then finish it. It's added to the circuit. Now I want to wire it. If I leave this wire in place and hit tab, it wants to draw a line in. Let me do that. It wants to draw a wiring arc from the closest receptacle, which ends up being this one down here. Well, I don't really like the look of this coming back, and I really like this to come from here to this one to this one. So the way I can do that is get rid of this, is I have to actually delete this other wire. Just hit delete. Now, when I hit the circuit, you can see that it is redrawing these in a more logical fashion because that other wire is not there. And then I can take this and move it as I want and move the endpoints like we did in the previous episodes. So I just want to show you that's one method that you can have the wiring automatically generated to your advantage. And a similar approach down here, a branch over like this should be fine. So I'm going to leave that. Unless I wanted to go from here to here to here, I can rearrange these myself, but I'm going to let this do what it wants. I need to add it first. And then again, have to reselect the circuit, get that guy. And I decided I want to pull him up here and move these grips like we did before. So I just want to show that's one way you can get this wiring to show more like you want without having to manually move it around. So now that we have all these beautiful looking views and plans set up and schedules done, we need to drag these onto sheets so that we can create PDFs or print these on paper and make them useful. So how do we do that? Well, down here in the project browser under Legends and Schedules, Panel Schedules, you'll see Sheets. And right now we have none. And that's right above Families. So we can right-click, depending on which version you're in, you can right-click and say New Sheet, or you can go up to View. It's another View option. And then over here, there's a Sheet. Creates a page for a document set. Click on Sheet. And depending on which title blocks you have in your project at the time, you can select one. The out-of-the-box Revit template that we are in right now does come with a size E1, 30-inch by 42-inch title block that we can use. So we'll use that. Say OK. And it just creates a sheet, puts the title block in. It's pretty much blank. Under our sheets, if you expand it, you'll see a sheet that it just gives a number to. You can right-click and do a rename, or you can even click it and hit F2 to get to the sheet title renaming. We'll call our first plan E100, and that will be the electrical cover or electrical symbols, whatever you want to call your first sheet. And then we can drag our symbol list into that we've started. And we only have a partial symbol list right now. But eventually you'll have your full symbol list that you can bring on here. Now there's a couple options for this view title. It takes the default up here of called viewport 1. You can create other kinds of views where maybe you don't want the title, or maybe you don't want a scale. Maybe you want this to look differently. So that can be done. And I'll have a whole separate video on how to deal with sheets and view titles and customize that. Because again, sometimes we don't even want the scale, or we don't even want a title. But in this case, we don't even need a view title. So we can set this up for a none. So duplicate this, and let's call this none. And the view title will be none. Show extension line no. So our none will just be blank. We don't need a view title just for a symbol list. And again, this is just the start of our symbol list. And then we can create some other sheets. So let's create another sheet. And once you've created the sheet, you'll see down here that it shows what has been dragged onto that sheet. So it shows that the legend called symbols has been dragged onto that sheet. And you can actually get to this legend from this sheet list right here. Now I open it just as if I went up to my legends and hit symbols. So that's another way to get to that sheet. You can also, on the sheet, double click it, and now I'm editing the legend. I can't edit the sheet. So it's like I've popped into kind of a viewport. And if I need to get back out here, double click over here and you're back out to your sheet. So I personally think it gets a little confusing to do it this way. You forget which one you're in. So I prefer to either click fully into the view this way or through the project browser up here. But that's personal preference. Let's create another sheet, a new sheet. Okay, now we're going to call this one E200. And this will be first floor plan, lighting. And you can put these in whatever order you would like. And then we can drag our first floor lighting plan. We just hold it, drag it over, let go, and see how it looks. And then place this anywhere on your sheet you would like. So I'm going to kind of center it here, leave some room for maybe city comments in the upper right. Click it on there. And luckily our scale was set up properly so that it fits on the sheet that we have. Now, if you go down here, you'll see that the title comes in the same way that the view was named. So we have a 1-. You may not want that actually to show a 1-. So you can just click on the sheet and you can come down here to the right under identity data. You have the view name, which is the name from here. And then under that, you can have the title on the sheet and it can be different. And for me, it's typically the same, but without the one. Or maybe I had a shorthand name for the view name, and actually I want a full name. So I'll just go first floor plan lighting and apply that. So you feel like you've typed it twice because you had to name the sheet and you had to name the view. But that's typical. And it shows our scale. There's a couple ways to pick this stuff. You can click here on the view, and that will let you move the whole view. Undo that. However, if you escape out and just click on the view title, now you can move it independent of the view. See how that goes by itself? Let's undo that. If you select this view and move it, everything moves together, the whole view. But if you just select the view title, it moves by itself. So perhaps we want to get that moved differently, and now we can move the whole thing down. So you have some variety on how you can do that. You can also click here and get to these little dots at the end, and so you can shorten this up if you want to. Maybe you just want a short little line instead of going clear across. So you can mess with that. So we'll set up all of our sheets in the same manner and just drag them over. And just as a note, like I mentioned before, most views you can only drag onto one sheet. I cannot create another floor plan lighting and drag this same sheet over. The only thing I can repeat over here are these legends. So for example, I put a legend on the electrical cover. I can also drag this legend onto this sheet, but I can't drag this floor plan again. This view is already placed on that sheet. So to place a similar view on a sheet, you can use the duplicate view or duplicate with detailing. You can also duplicate as a dependent. There's other view commands we can do to deal with that, which we would cover in another video. But for now, we've got our sheet named. Now, how can we get owner and project name in here? Now, we could just jump in here and start typing these things in. However, we know that our architectural plan is already set up. If we look at the PDF, you can see that it's already set up as sample house. So we can just bring that data into our model from there. The way we do that is under Manage, Transfer Project Standards, right there. And it's bringing it in from the architectural. It knows that we already have this architecture model open. So all these things, there's even things like browser organization and all these different settings for systems, even conduit sizes. So let's check none. All we want to bring in is some information about the project. So there's project info and project parameters. We want project info. Say okay to that. And it brings in energy settings, project information, and some shared site information, and just overwrite what we have. And what that did is it brought in the title block information, Autodesk sample house. Or on a more complicated name of a project, which may have the address and things like that, this is very handy. And then under here, you can put your issue date, you can put who is drawn by, checked by, all of this information for the title block. And that is repeated on every sheet. Go to electrical cover, that information also got brought in. So let's go ahead and make that site plan sheet because we were concerned about the scale and how that would look. So let's create a plan here and call it E101 Site Plan Electrical. And drag this site plan and see what we get. Okay, so it looks fairly small on this sheet. So the scale we selected, 1 inch equals 20 feet, is a little bit too small. So let's see what happens if we bump this up to a different size. Now it's already on the sheet, so we can just leave it there, but let's go into our site plan. And we have this set up as a view template, so we need to change the view template. Let's change it to 1 inch equals 10 feet. And we may have to go through and adjust some of these leaders and notes, but right now they look like they're okay. And let's see how that looks. Let's see if it fits. It's a little bit big, but we can adjust. Looks like we have some room up here to adjust the actual plan. So again, we can get to the plan from here, get to the view, and let's go ahead and bring this down to here. We can bring the sides in a bit with our crop region. Let's try that. There, that looks like it's fitting better. Now we have this we can deal with, and this is too short. One thing I would say is you can just delete this off here, and all we've done is taken it off the sheet. We haven't deleted the plan. Go back to the site plan, re-drag it in, and it will resize the view title to the size of the window or viewport automatically when you drag it in. So that can save you some resizing. So that looks much better. And then our view itself, I think our notes work. This is a little bit away, but that should work. And our light and our home runs, I think everything looks okay in this scale. And again, these section cuts that are not used, that did not get dragged onto plans, will not be there when we print this out. I'll go through and do the rest of these sheet setups off camera, and we'll go from there. And now that we have all of our sheets created, we need to create PDFs of these sheets. As of Revit 2022, there's two different ways to do this. The first way, the way we used to do it, is to just use the print function, and then you can select a printer such as a Bluebeam PDF type printer or Adobe, and use that. And then what we do is we have a file you want to name it, and the print range, and then things like the settings, like the sheet size. So first thing, we select our printer, and then I jump down here to the print range, either the current window, which would just be this sheet that I'm looking at, or selected views and sheets. Now you can create, if you hit select, you can create a set of, in our case, sheets that you want to print. Right now, as long as this isn't checked, uncheck that. Hide unchecked views or sheets. Well, if you hide unchecked views or sheets, you can't check any, so uncheck that. Here's all the views, and then eventually we get down to sheets. Here's our sheets. We want to create finished sheets, so we don't need views. And you can uncheck the views from here. So all you see is the sheets, and that makes it a little bit easier. So narrow it down to sheets. And in this case, all of our sheets are ready for printing. Sometimes you'll have sheets set up that are not ready yet, and so you would not check those. So we want to check all of these, and then we can save this as a set name so that we can print these again. So up here, right here, we can save it as and give it a name. And I'll just call this electrical set. And so that saves this selection of sheets as a print set name that you can refer to again. So you don't have to check these again next time. And now that we have those picked, we can say select that. And do we want to save those for use in a future Revit session? Yes, we already did that. Called electrical set. And then up here, it defaults to create separate files. You can create separate PDFs for each sheet if you want, but I typically like to combine them into one set. So I'll hit combine. And then the settings for the sheet size, we can close this now and look, and the name of this was E1 30 by 42. So there's the size. Now sometimes it won't say that in your title block, so you may have to measure it. And you can just measure it with these tools here, and you'll see here that that's 3'6". So back to the print, and then we want to set up our sheet size for that 30 by 42. So we do not have any named print setups, so we'll have to create it from scratch. Pop in here, you see there's a lot of different sizes. We want to go down to the ANSI E1, which is 30 by 42. And then center is fine. Now, how do we want it to zoom? If you fit to page, it will typically add margins around your sheet. We don't want that. We want it zoomed at exactly 100%. And then we want to, down here is where we can hide these unreferenced view tags, which are those section views. Hide scope boxes, hide crop boundaries, and that's what we need to set for that. The rest of these defaults are fine. Vector, processing, high quality, and we just keep it in color. And then save this setup as something we can come back to. So I like to give it a PDF and then a size, PDF 30 by 42. And now we can save this. And you would do this in your project template so you have these available in multiple sizes. Say OK to that. And everything is set up. So now we can say OK, and it will ask you where do you want to save it, and then you'll have a PDF document that we can look at. And then open up the PDF and take a look and see how it printed. It looks like it went clear out to the edges. It printed well. And it has nice curved vector processing. It's not pixelated, so it does a nice print job even if you zoom in. So everything looks good there. And it got all of our sheets. Go through the whole set. Now you have your PDF set printed with the printer function. Now the other way you can do this is, instead of printing it, there's a button here now called Create PDF. It's also under File, Export PDF. And it's similar to the print window, where you can select what do you want to print. So you can go, and it remembers your electrical set that you just created in your print settings. So fortunately, they use the same settings. And then here is where we can combine the views into a single PDF. And you can give it a name. And then it will automatically use your sheet size. And then we can hide unreferenced view tags and hide all that and say export. You want to save them, and we can call this PDF 30 by 42. That's the part that didn't save. And in the background, down at the bottom, you can see it's printing. And there it's done. So that concludes this 10-episode full project series. And I sure hope you learned something in this. I will be doing more projects in the future that get a little more complicated. We'll do a full commercial project and things like that, along with continued individual little videos about how to do certain things. So thank you for sticking through to the end, and thank you if you've subscribed. I really appreciate that. And until next time.